recording.
Boom! Nutty. Professor. I'm Thundercloud. I've changed places. I'm in front of the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame sign here on Chillin Tuesday. On this Tuesday, the 3rd of October 2023. Yes, once again, it's me. Yes, ready for another night of poetry for you and you and you and you to share with all the world. And if you're liking this, make sure you give it a thumbs up and you tell me who would you like me to read of Australian poets in Chillin Tuesday? Think about that. Who would you like to read in Chillin Tuesday? All right, let's begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I broadcast here in Guyra, the Kamilaroi and Banbai people, to acknowledge the continuing connection to the land and that sovereignty's never been ceded. Ooh, I'll start with a peppermint tea. Yummy, yummy. In an Australian Poetry Hall of Fame cup. You can check them out on our website. We've got Australian Poetry Hall of Fame cups and mugs. We've got Australian Poetry Hall of Fame t-shirts and other merchandise there, all under www.australianpoetryhalloffame.com.au. You can also check out my Meanwhile in Australia.com website for other merchandise that supports the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame as well. All right. Well, we're coming up to a very important moment in our story, togetherness, the one mob story of the continent we now call Australia. Yeah. And what's going on? Well, we are about to have a referendum, a voice for a yes or a no for a voice. Now, my personal position is quite clear on this, and you can find that on my private Facebook page if you wish to go and follow me, including links to reasons and supporting evidence as to why I would tend to vote that way. All right, but the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame itself, being not a human, is bipartisan, so it has no opinion. All right, but one of our wonderful poets, Australian native poets, Indigenous poets, First Nations poets, was Kath Walker, who changed her name to Oodgeroo Noonuccal. Oodgeroo means paperbark, and Noonuccal was of the clan that she was on the island of Minjerribah, which is currently known as Stradbroke Island, aka also known as Minjerribah, just off the coast of Brisbane. Now, this one here was written not long after the 1967 referendum, in which the race provision was voted into the referendum to create special laws for Aboriginal people, but also to give Aboriginal people citizenship. And in doing that, the interesting part of the poem that I'll be reading is the final part of it, because it is written just after that, and this is called Municipal Gum by Kath Walker, who changed her name to Oodgeroo Noonuccal. She was born on the 3rd of November 1920. She passed on the 16th of September 1993. And yes, that's probably a bit too late to give a cultural sensitivity warning about the fact that I'll be mentioning people who have died. But I will, and I have. This one's called Municipal Gum. I'll stand up for it. gum tree. In the city street, hard bitumen around your feet. Rather, you should be in the cool world of leafy forest halls and wild bird calls. Here, you seems to me like that poor cart horse, castrated, broken, a thing wronged, strapped and buckled, its held prolonged, whose hung head and listless mien express its hopelessness. Municipal gum, it is dolorous to see you thus set in your black grass of bitumen. Oh, fellow citizen, what have they done to us? So that's quite a powerful poem from Kath Walker, lamenting the fact that they'd been brought in under the Constitution of Australia as citizens to be able to make special laws, which is quite a racist thing, really. And this still makes Australia like pretty much an apartheid state due to our Constitution at the moment. If you read it correctly. Now, the next one that Kath Walker, Oodgeroo Noonuccal, also wrote, which I think really says everything about, well, she's passed on now, what she would think about this voice. It's called an Aboriginal Charter of Rights by Oodgeroo Noonuccal. We want hope, not racialism. Brotherhood, not ostracism. Black advance, not white ascendance. Make us equals, not dependents. We need help, not exploitation. We want freedom, not frustration. Not control, but self-reliance. Independence, not compliance. Not rebuff, but education. Self-respect, not resignation. Free us from mean subjection, from a bureaucrat protection. Let's forget the old-time slavers. Give us fellowship, not favours. Encouragement, not prohibitions. Homes, not settlements and missions. We need love, not overlordship. Grip of hand, not whip hand wardship. Opportunity that places white and black on equal basis. You dishearten, not defend us. Circumscribe who should befriend us. Give us welcome, not aversion. Give us choice, not cold coercion. Status, not discrimination. Human rights, not segregation. You, the law, like Roman Pontius. Make us proud, not colour conscious. Give us the deal you still deny us. Give us goodwill, not bigot bias. Give ambition, not prevention. Confidence, not condescension. Give incentive, not restriction. Give us Christ, not crucifixion. Though baptized and blessed and Bibled, we are still tabooed and libelled. You devout salvation sellers, make us neighbours, not fringe dwellers. Make us mates, not poor relations, citizens, not serfs on stations. Must we native old Australians in our land rank as aliens? Banish bands and conquer caste. Then we'll win our own at last. Yeah, that's quite a powerful poem, and in fact I might reread that and put that up on YouTube all by itself. I think that's quite important to be out there for every Australian to hear, and First Nation Australian. Right, now I'm going to go right back in, a little back in time, not very far really, because only a couple of 100 years, and I've got a bit of a journey that I'll be taking us on tonight. I've been over at Inverell and Tingha. I visited the Wing Hin Long Emporium and Museum there, and I got a Tingha poem. I got a few other books from Orpheus Bookstore in Tingha, so shout out to Orpheus Bookstore if you're over there, check it out. So I'm going to be starting out with the Colonial Poets, edited by GAWilson, published by Angus and Robertson. Then moving on to a 1936 book, the Roma Poetry Book, which was published by Pellegrini, and it was produced for primary and secondary school in Australia. So it's a mixture of Australian and the other English poetry. Then I'm going to be reading later on Tingha 1908 by Bert Cannon. I'll tell you a little bit more about Tingha. Then Jack Davis, a very famous Western Australian Noongar First Nations poet. And then one poet from Australian Voices Poetry and Prose of the 1970s. So we've got a bit of a show ahead to you tonight here on Chillin Tuesday. So let's get the show further underway. I'll have a sip of my peppermint tea. And while I'm sipping my peppermint tea, getting my throat ready, you can just click on the thumbs up button. Thank you. Thank you very much. Have you thought about who you would like me to read next week? Come on, write down a poet that you would really love to hear me read next week in the comments. Think about it and do it. That'd be lovely. Appreciate it. All right, the Colonial Poets. Now, the reason I've selected this, I got this one here, because it's got a poem by Charles Tompson. Now, I'm not exactly sure what year this was written, but the book was published by Angus and Robertson in 1983, I think, from memory. It's falling apart, so I've got to be rather gentle with it. 1974, oh my goodness, yeah, well, it's over nearly 50 years old. This particular one, and it's got cheap glue, so see the pages are falling out. As they used to do back then, you know, the pages are yellowing, the glue's falling apart. Perfect bound, yeah, not perfect. So Charles Tompson, it's called Blacktown. There's a bit of a blurb in the beginning. Written on the veranda of the chapel at the deserted hamlet of Blacktown, an establishment formed by the government some years since for the purpose of civilising the Aboriginal natives of Australia and teaching them the art of agriculture, etc. on the new Richmond Road, about 28 miles distant from the metropolis. It is much to be lamented that the poor heathen possessors were allowed to desert the establishment. This is the words of this man back in the day. As much as good emanated from the rules first adopted there, Mr. Walker of the Wesleyan Mission formerly officiated in the chapel and was entrusted with the care of the pupils and establishment. The gentlemen have since left it, and at the time I wrote the following elegy. The chapel and the cottages were deserted, the later in ruins, and the whole scene exhibited the strongest marks of desolation. I now, however, understand that it is the intention of the government to renew the establishment. Well, who knows what happened? I don't. Blacktown. From the dull portal, whence the expectant eye surveys the partial forest-bounded sky, roves o'er a portion of neglected ground with ruined huts and fences scattered round. Then sated closes on the dreary view, no charms to tempt, no beauties to pursue. Fancy awakes her meditative powers to paint the visions of departed hours, portrays the annals of the subject seen and gives to memory what it once has been. Ill-fated hamlet, from each tottering shed, thy sable inmates perhaps forever fled. Poor restless wanderers of the woody plain, the skies their covert, nature their domain. Seek with the birds the casual dole of heaven, pleased with their lot, content with what is given. Time was and recent memory speaks as true, when round each little cot a garden grew, a field whose culture served a twofold part, food and instruction in the rural art. The lording tenant and his sable wife were taught to prize the sweets of social life and send their offspring in the dawn of youth to schools of learning and the paths of truth. There's a little asterisk there. The children were instructed by Reverend Mr. Walker in the articles of the Christian Creed and in the more refined, though less essential, rudiments of literature. Continue. Poor thoughtless almsmen of the frugal wild, all blushed once to own this darkling child. Scarce 12 revolving years their course have run, since Reformation's work was not begun. In that dark era, thus the yearning heart taught the warm lip its dictates to impart. Lost child, shall we the savage part pursue? Must all despise thee for thy sable hue? Will charity no warm vice-gregant send to own thee brother, or to call thee friend? True, there are some whose panting blossoms thirst with holy zeal to raise thee from the dust, to infuse those truths to burdened sinners given, and fix thy wandering reckless mind on heaven. But these bright thoughts, though unwilling fates deride, the will is theirs, the ability denied. And shall on these alone the wretch repose, to plying the healing styptic to his woes? Ah, no, young hope unwilling to expire, yet with light pinions fans her slumbering fire. That day will come, nor distant be that day, when superstition's mists shall melt away, and brightening beams of truth's triumphant light from his last empire chased the fiend of night. The day did come, the day so oft besought, that on its wing the sacred balsam brought, and gave a man to rule our austral clime, his flower since gathered by the hand of time, who mourned the rigours of our brother's fate and strove to illuminate his unenlightened state. Reason enforced what charity began, and heaven approved the philanthropic plan. Soon from the plain a modest structure rose, doomed for the sable proselytes' repose. Within those walls that lasting boon was given, the power to trace salvation's path to heaven. There too, through learning's maze, the youth were led, and views of civil arts before them spread. nor beamed this soft benevolence in vain. Warm emulation broke the Gothic chain. Docile, they struggled for contested boys and snatched from cultured youth the meed of praise. Go on, Britannia, consummate thy plan, and train thy hopeful pupil up to man. What thousands here will then attest thy worth, and bless the hour when ocean gave thee birth. Thee, on whose walls resplendent and unfurled, meek Salem's banners wave and Christianize the world. Oh my God. Oh, excuse me. Oh, blessed ideas by the powers above, shared on a heart, exalted in their love, to wake from sullen night the grovelling soul and subject to reason's wise control, and breathe the spirit of enlivening truth and teach the bliss of heaven's eternal youth. To thee, Macquarie, was the dictate given, thou wert the chosen delegate of heaven. Oh, goodness gracious. You hear that? To thee, Macquarie, was the dictate given, thou wert the chosen delegate of heaven. I want to read that again. Just like I can't, it's unbelievable. But it's there, the chosen delegate of heaven, Macquarie, Governor Macquarie. That's just obscene. It is from today's point of view anyway. I'll keep reading. Thousands adored thee for the angelic deed, and for thy parted soul invoke thy Christian's meed. Ill-fated hamlet round thy dull domain, lone silence holds her melancholy reign. This lowly structure where each Sabbath pressed, and it just goes, there's a couple of side notes. The native institution was established by Macquarie in 1814, sorry. So, this lowly structure where each Sabbath pressed, a pious group by strangers is possessed. Thy once fair dawning beauties all are gone. Thy gardens fallow lie with weeds overgrown. Wild flowers and spindling grass alone are seen where cornfields wave their undulating green. Dark vines along the untrod footpaths creep, and all the desert landscape seems to weep. Thus shall man's proudest, noblest projections fade, and with their founder in the dust be laid. The imperial palace and the lowly cot alike must share this universal lot, and now before Vulcan, conquering scythe of time, such was proud Ilion's fate, and such, alas, is thine. Well, that's a really, really very telling perspective of the way that, the paternalistic way that the settlers and the colonists really had these Christian intentions to do the, in inverted commas, the right thing and help the poor, low natives. They were seen as sort of try and lift them up out of their whatever and give them their Englishness. Yeah, very, very, very telling poem, that one. All right. Well, I'm moving now on to this one here I got, the Roma Book of Poetry. It was published in 1939. It cost me $25 for this old thing. But it doesn't matter because it's going here into the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame's Australian Poetry Library. This is the 4th edition, and again, it's a selection of not only Australian but also international poetry. The 4th revised edition, an anthology for primary and high school classes, selected by V.L. Palazzi BA, Bachelor of Arts, Diocesan Inspector of Schools, Maitland, New South Wales. And it was published by Pellegrini in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth, and it was registered at the General Post Office, Sydney, for transmission through the post as a book. All right, I've selected a few of the Australian ones here to, I guess, to really highlight often the romantic nature of Australian poets focusing on the beauty of the bush and totally missing some of the, I don't know. Anyway, let's begin with James L. Cuthbertson's The Australian Sunrise. The morning star paled slowly, and the cross hung low to the sea. And down the shadowy reaches the tide came swirling free. The lustrous purple blackness of the soft Australian night waned in the grey awakening that heralded the light. Still in the dying darkness, still in the forest dim, the pearly dew of the dawning clung to each giant limb. Till the sun come up from the ocean, red with the cold sea mist, and smote on the limestone ridges and the shining treetops kissed. Then the fiery scorpion vanished, the magpie's note was heard, and the wind in the she-oak wavered, and the honeysuckles stirred. The airy golden vapour rose from the river breast. The kingfisher came darting out of his crannied nest. And the bulrushes and reed beds put off their sallow grey and burnt with cloudy crimson at the dawning of the day. The Australian Sunrise by James L. Cuthbertson. The next one, The Bush by James L. Cuthbertson. Give us from dawn to dark blue of Australian skies. Let there be none to mark whither our pathway lies. Give us when noontide comes, rest in the woodland free, fragrant breath of the gums, cold sweet scent of the sea. Give us the wattle's gold and the dew-laden air, and the loveliness bold, loneliest landscapes where. There are the haunts we love, glad with enchanted hours, bright as the heavens above, fresh as the wild bush flowers. James L. Cuthbertson. The next one is From Memory by Zora Cross. Memory. From memory. Late last night, when the whole world slept, along the garden of dreams I crept, and I pulled the bell of an old house where the moon dipped down like a little white mouse. I tapped the door and I tossed my head. Are you in, little girl? Are you in? I said. And while I waited and shook with cold, through the door tripped me, just 8 years old. I looked so sweet with my pigtails down, tied up with a ribbon of dusky brown, with dimpled chin full of childish charms and my old black dolly asleep in my arms. I sat me down when I saw myself, and I told little tales of a moonland elf. I laughed and sang as I used to do when the whole world was ruled by Little Boy Blue. Zora Cross, from memory. The next one is a Victor J. Daley poem. An Australian day, far out in the blessed country, beyond the smoky town, the winds of God were blowing, evermore up and down. The trees were waving signals of joy from the bush beyond, the gum its blue-green banner, the fern its dark green frond. Flower called to flower in whispers, by sweet caressing names, and young gum shoots sprang upward like woodland altar flames, and deep in the distant ranges the magpie's flutting song roused musical mocking echoes in the woods of Dandenong, and riders were galloping gaily with loose-held flowing reins through dim and shadowy gullies, across broad treeless plains. And out of the sea at morning the sun rose golden bright, and in crimson and gold and purple sank into the sea at night. An Australian Day by Victor Daley. And the last one I've got here is a Dorothea Mackellar poem. And it's not My Country, which is the one that goes, I love a sunburned country, but it's in here. This is called Colour by Dorothea Mackellar. The lovely things that I have watched unthinking, unknowing day by day, that their soft eyes had steeped my soul in colour that will not pass away. Great saffron sunset clouds and larkspur mountains, and fenceless miles of plain, and hillsides golden green, that in that unearthly, clear shining after rain, and nights of blue and pearl and long and smooth beaches, yellow as sunburnt wheat, enticed with a line of foam that creams and hisses, enticing weary feet, and emeralds and sunset-hearted opals, with Asian marble veined, with scarlet flames and cool green jade and moonstones, misty and azure stained, or almond trees in bloom and oleanders, or a wide purple sea of plain land gorgeous with a lovely poison, the evil darling pea. If I am tired, I call on these to help me to dream in dawnlit skies, lemon and pink or faintest, coolest lilac float on my soothed eyes. There is no night so black but you shine through it. There is no morn so clear. O colour of the world, but I can find you, most tender, pure and clear. Thanks be to God, who gave this gift of colour, which who shall seek shall find. Thanks be to God, who gives me strength to hold it, though I were stricken blind. Okay, so that's out of the Roma poetry book. That's Dorothea Mackellar, Colour. All right, as I said today, I was over in the little tin mining town of Tingha, and then I went off to Inverell today because I've had a large weekend with our Gyra Trout Festival here. We had a wonderful fun evening of karaoke on Friday night, a fantastic Saturday, a Sunday of Poets Breakfast, and a Monday of Thundercloud's Australian Poetry Show, of course. Yes, that's yours truly. And here I am, Chillin Tuesday. It's just poetry every day. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, every day. I wake up, there's poetry. I go to bed to poetry. I walk past poetry signs and poetry books all the time. Tingha, 1908, by Bert Cannon. Have you ever been to Tingha? Just outside of Inverell, where the road sides lined with boulders and mullock heaps as well, and potholes by the hundreds and workings by the score, where an old fossicker has worked the ground before. And if you've ever been there, I think you will agree that something seems to call you back. Well, that's how it is with me. And though the work was pretty tough, we didn't seem to mind. We'd always get togged up and off to town, and there, our mates, we'd find. We'd meet at old Sam Cowan's, down by the Chinese store, and Sam would play his records. He had them by the score. His old Bell Edison machine, he'd wind it up with pride, and we'd sit around and listen in the parlour just inside. Young Fred Elbro at the piano would keep the evening bright, and he, we all agreed, the star artist of the night. Marcus Rooney, the town comedian, and poor old Algie Howe, who drifted from the city and took to milking cows. Nugget Hogan and Peter Murdoch, who played an old violin, and Grazzy Arentz with his 4 eyes, who did nothing but sing and grin. George Henry Paget Bailey, whose beard was tinged with grey, was known as the Terror of Queensland. That is, in his day. And there was Frisky Hayden, who drove the best turnout, who'd mix it with the travelling pugs and anywhere about, and Stringybark Nielsen, who was never known to shout. There were many others present, but it's so long ago, but I'll mention a few others that perhaps you'll know. Sidney Rappanecker, Ted McCronan, and Artie Faulkner, who lived among the blacks out on the station Awaramara. And the crowd, they would get merry as they passed around the bar, and long Bert Cannon sang, "When the springtime brings the roses, Jessie dear." And before the evening ended, and back to camp we'd roam, Blob Hollings would render the miner's dream of home. It's many years since I saw Tingha. 'Twas when Burns and Johnson fought. I've travelled many miles since then, and I've been in many a port. But memories often take me back to those good old mining days, to the pals I've left so staunch and true, who've had such manly ways. And somehow things don't seem the same, nor friends prove half as true as those rough blokes in Tingha, the blokes that I once knew. If I go back to Tingha, well, that's where I will stay, and my old bones can lie there right till Judgment Day. And somehow this may come to pass. I may yet be with the Sophias and the Topaz, pushing up the grass. Tingha, by Bert Cannon. Now, as you're probably aware, because I have told you before, in November here we've got the Poets on the Mountain Festival at GAWilson, which includes the New South Wales Bush Poetry Championship, both written and performance, and it's auspiced by the Australian Bush Poets Association. Now you can get entry forms on the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame's events page or on the downloads page at www.australianpoetryhalloffame.com.au, or you can also get it from the abpa.org.au, the Australian Bush Poets Association. Now, if you are a member of the Australian Bush Poets Association, it's cheaper to enter as well, because of course we want to encourage people to join the Australian Bush Poets Association. You don't have to be a bush poet to join, and you'll get 4 magazines a year too from the Australian Bush Poets Association. So that's in November. Check it out on our website, Poets on the Mountain at GAWilson. Come on up here, because it's going to be really exciting. We're actually going to have some of the best poets in Australia. Tom McElveen, Robin Sykes, and a bunch of others that have already entered. And I just want to keep it secret, but I just can't. I'm bursting, you know. I'm just with excitement. All right, and I'm not on, but I better cross my legs because I don't want to wee everywhere with excitement. All right, moving right along. Okay, another famous, well, a First Nations poet, after doing Oodgeroo Noonuccal first of all, is Jack Davis. He was born in 1917 and spent his childhood in the dairying and timber mill towns of Yarloop, about 140 kilometres south of Perth. He's led an active and colourful life as a stockman, itinerant labourer, lay preacher, activist, spokesman, storyteller, dramatist, actor and poet. He wrote quite a few plays as well. His two previous poetry collections were The Firstborn and Other Poems and Didjereedoo, Poems from Aboriginal Australia, published in 1970 and 78 respectively. This new volume of poems takes up many of the themes and concerns found in his earlier work, whether describing a bush creature with gentle irony and a twinkle in his pen observing the mysteries of human behaviour, evoking with lyrical grace the Aboriginal love of the land, or reaching out for mutual understanding across barriers of prejudice and ignorance. These poems speak simply and openly, sometimes poignantly, always with sincerity and delight in language. This was John Pat and Other Poems by Jack Davis. It's the book, published by Dent Publishing in Melbourne with the assistance of the Australia Council in 1988. Dedicated to Maisie Pat and all other mothers who've suffered a similar loss. So the first one I've got here, well, the foreword's by Mudroo, Colin Johnson, but I'm not going to read you that because it's too long. Beginning with a winter's day at the beach. It was a day, cold, grey with rain, seaweed salt white trembled, dry, and a gull's lone cry added to my pain. Sea and sky blurred by cloud, I crouched, hunched, low, near the old boat, half submerged, the sea its shroud. John Pat, introduction. John Pat was a 16-year-old Aboriginal boy who died of head injuries, alleged to have been caused in a disturbance between police and Aborigines in Robertson, WA in 1983. 4 police were charged with manslaughter over the incident. They were acquitted. There is one word in here, Guddia, which is a Kimberley term for white man, Guddia, white man. Here we go, John Pat. Right of life, the pious said. Forget the past is dead. But all I see in front of me is a concrete floor, a cell door, and John Pat. Tear out the page. Forget his age. Thin skull, they cried. That's why he died. But I can't forget the silhouette of a concrete floor, a cell door, and John Pat. The end product of Guddia law is a viaduct for fang and claw and a place to dwell like Roborn's hell of a concrete floor, a cell door, and John Pat. He's there. Where? There in their minds now. Deep within, there to prance, a sidelong glance, a silly grin, to remind them all of a guttier wall, a concrete floor, a cell door, and John Pat. Bear in mind when this was written and it mentions Ayers Rock, not Uluru and the Olgas. It's called Didjereedoo. Didjereedoo, didgeridoo, thunder through the night, and the ochre-painted bodies gleam in the firelight. We mime the hunt of the kangaroo, the walk of the stately brogues, and the resonant sounds of the didgeridoo encompass Ayers Rock and the Olgas. You keep your drums and steel guitars, we'll keep our age-old culture. For far too long we've been the dove, and you have been the vulture. The executioner. Steel bites, tree falls. Material might kills, mauls. He wipes his brow. Increase my income now, he said, while tree and I together bled. Yellowcake. Yellowcake, yellowcake, where have you been? I've been asleep in the ground, not part of the scene. But now I'm awake, I can sing and shout, innuendo, crescendo as to what it's all about. I can kill, I can maim, I can burn, I can blind, treat all men the same, the whole of mankind. I can shatter the earth, I can leap to the sun, and cut off your birth before it's begun. Yellowcake. Nuclear. I saw a flash of yellow light as Titan thunder split the night. Then darkness. No sound now, only the starkness of flesh uncontrolled, and knowing I'm a cold statistic of decaying bone, falling hair, yet running helter-skelter to the fallout shelter. They count their dollars, claw at white collars, and watch their own children dying there. Nuclear by Jack Davis. And finally, 150 years, written in protest at the non-inclusion of Aborigines in the celebration of 150 years of European settlement in Western Australia, 1829 to 1979. I walked slowly along the river. Old iron, broken concrete, rusted cans, scattered stark along the shore. Plastic strewn by man and tide, littered loudly mute on sparse growth, struggling to survive. A flock of gulls quarrelled over debris. A lone shag looked hopefully down at turgid water. and juggernauts of steel and stone made jigsaw patterns against the city sky. So now that the banners have fluttered, the eulogies ended and the tattoos have rendered, the rattles of spears, look back and remember the end of December in 150 years. 3 boys crackled past on trail bikes. Long blonde hair waving in the wind. Speedboats erupted power, while lesser craft surged along behind. The breeze rustled a patch of bull-oak, reminding me of swan, bittern, wild duck winging, now all alien to the river. Sir John Forrest stood tall in stone in St. George's Terrace, gun across shoulder, symbolic of what had removed the river's first children. And that other river, the Murray, where Western Australia's first mass murderer, Captain Sterling, trappings flashly, rode gaily at the head of 24 men. For an hour they fired, and bodies black, mutilated, floated down the blood-stained stream. So now that the banners have fluttered, their eulogies ended and the tattoos have rendered, the rattle of spears, look back and remember the end of December and 150 years. Land. Oh, white man, how can I make you understand this love of land? It has the touch of a child's fingertips to a mother's lips. Her loveliness is summer red, pink fading gold. As mother's sun sinks to fold, herself in cloak of night, embossed with the light of stars from a black nation's dreamtime. So John Pat and other poems by Jack Davis. All right. Well, there we go. I'm done, except I've got one more here. Australian Voices, prose, poetry and prose of the 1970s. And this one, another First Nations writer, Yasmin Gunaratni, Washing the Grain. Round and round the year tilts, from noon night time to dawn, from sunlight to shadow, and the pale days falling from this side to that yield a fine cloudiness only. We are so far now, so far, cry the grains, the home field only a memory warm in the husk, and that too sloughed off, that too lost in the mortar's pounding. Round and round spin the days, another year of this churning and tilting, washing at last, quite over the rim. Will we lie in clear water, pure, transparent, delicately separate? We shall become consumable. Our pale substance will satisfy somebody. And this dark grit, trapped in the bowl's fine furrows, may be disposed of, thrown out upon the wattles and dry grass. Washing the Grain by Yasmin Gunaratni. All right. Well, that's it for me from Chillin Tuesday on this Tuesday, the 3rd of October, 2023. Tomorrow night, we've got Wednesday Words here from the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. Yes, if you're into poetry and you want to do some poetry or come and listen to some poetry, come to Zora. We got free camping down at the lagoon, and of course November when we've got the Poets on the Mountain Festival from the 12th, beginning with the Poetry Walkabout held by the New England Writers Centre here. So check that out on the New England Writers Centre page. And then the Australian Poetry Champion, or the New South Wales Bush Poetry Championship. Also, don't forget the Australian Poetry Film Festival, which is still taking submissions on filmfreeway.com. So you can check that out on my website, on the website of the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame.com.au. I'm Thundercloud. Boom, I'm out of here, but I'm not actually out of here, I'll be here, but I'm saying goodbye. Goodbye. See you later. Hey, yeah, that's it. But we will see you tomorrow and many, many, many more times. Lots of love and all of that kind of stuff. See ya.